Welcome to 52 Miniatures. My name is Alex. Today, I'm painting Lemartes, a very angry space marine, as part of my Warhammer for Noobs series. I'm the noob, by the way. And I have an idea for how to come up with novel ideas for color schemes without having to do too much thinking. Plus, I'll do a little light background check on Mr. Lemartes. This series is based on that staff at my local friendly game store, Alphaspel, pick a model for me to paint. It's fun to paint random models. I get to learn some Warhammer lore, and when done, we exhibit the models in a cabinet at the store. So the kids can hopefully say, "Ooh, cool, I want to paint miniatures too, please. Insert name of parent or other wallet-holding person here." Sonia from Alphaspel picked Lemartes, a Blood Angel's chaplain and warden of the Death Company. Yeah, does not sound like someone you'd invite over for tea and scones. More like someone Captain Willard would meet on his Odyssey. But it's a pretty cool model, and a very Warhammer-y model. I mean, it's universally known that the more skulls, the more Warhammer. And this fellow even sports a skull mask, plus, I think, a further 9 skulls. Quite the feat. And it's the most bits-rich Space Marine I've assembled so far. The Blood Angels are typically red, the regular Space Marine kind, but the Death Company, not bringers of tea and biscuits, are styled black with red details. Lemartes brings in some extra death vibes with a bit of off-white, the universal skull color. I'm not much for trying to copy box art or paint, what's correct, but sometimes coming up with original color schemes can be a difficult thing. It's not always a breeze to be creative. But I got an idea that I'll be testing out on poor Mr. Lemartes. What if, just to get a bit of originality, I would invert the official color scheme? Just do a simple switch of blacks and whites. A black skull helmet would be very cool, as well as stepping down some black marble steps. And the idea could work for lots of schemes, just going by the box art, but inverting it. Stormcast could be blue, but with golden pauldrons. Regular Blood Angels could have more yellow and black, less red. Goblins bouncing around on squigs could have black squigs and red cloaks. It's a simple idea just to get the mind working a little bit on how to make things different if you feel the urge to do so. Let's give it a go and see how things work out. I'm thinking I'll do a rather traditional paint job, kind of try and copy the box art a little in style, a challenge for me as I'm definitely no box art style painter. And as I did a sub-assembly, I could prime the bits that are to be black, and the bits that are to be bonish, grey. The easiest way out would, of course, be to prime all those bits white and just go over it with a sepia wash and Bob's your uncle. Well, mine's called Andy, so I can't. And I felt like working up a little more of a painted look and thought grey would be a good starting point for the bone white. I start with getting a coat of bone colour on everything that's supposed to be bone coloured. I try my best to leave grey in between panels, like where two different coloured areas will be meeting each other, so that there's a darker colour, the grey, to separate things. It tends to make things look a little neater in the end. I work up the bone brighter with an almost white mixed into the bone colour, going brighter and brighter as I work my way across all the armoured panels. Folk who paint a lot of Space Marines kind of know where to put highlights by sheer muscle memory. I'm not that guy. Also, white, or in this case, bone, is just very tricky, I find, especially when doing something with its roots in a tabletop paint job. Moody white can go from dark shadows to blinding white with tints of color here and there, but tabletop style white is just so hard. Now, this model has a lot of crenulations. It's like the sculptors had an in-house bet. Who can add the most embellishments with skulls and rivets on wins, and someone was dead set on winning this bet. I actually enjoy painting plain Space Marines, especially the Horus Heresy version, but this is a minefield. Stray your brush just a little out of place and boom, you've gone too far. I think it's time for the Emperor of Mankind to decree all adornment-focused battlesuit smiths henceforth labelled heretics. It's time to give the regular hobby painter a chance. Anyway, the plan is to paint on all the base colors. There's gold, miles of gold, that I paint with a rather dark gold. There's iron. There's the red, hoping for a very 90s Warhammer red in the end, and some areas that are to be black. Now, Lemartes, as I stated before, is the warden of the Death Company, the guardian of the lost. The more I read about Space Marines while doing this series, the more they seem to have in common. One popular attribute seems to be to develop corruption in their genes. Not the pants, the stuff inside. I won't drag it out, but Space Marines are created by fitting out young men with extra organs and new genetics and stuff. These genetics, or gene seeds, were originally made by the Emperor out of the DNA of his 20 genetically engineered sons. Each son, a Primarch, got his own Space Marine Legion with Space Marines made out of his own DNA, so to speak. Now, this gene seed cannot be made anymore. The Emperor kind of forgot the recipe, and it's instead harvested from Marines upon death or sampled from a Primarch and stuff like that, and seems prominent to develop some flaw. For the Blood Angels, it's the Black Rage. If developed, you get an uncontrollable rage that tips you into insanity, as well as extra superhuman strength. Handy that. Kind of the sci-fi version of a Viking berserker on mushrooms. Our Lemartes is one of these raging, unstable people. Only for some reason he can sort of still control his mind, as well as communicate with the others who have gone mad in the same way, making him the perfect go-between, i.e. the warden of the damned or guardian of the lost or whatever. Saves the sane killing machines from having to talk to the insane killing machines. Okay, I'm now going to do something I very rarely do, and that's slosh a wash all over this model. I haven't used washes much in a while, but as I'm after that sort of Warhammer tabletop vibe, I will. A sepia wash will stain the white to a deeper bone color. It will also work well to add depth to the gold, as well as the red. And as all these different areas line up against each other, I'll not only get that wash effect in darker recesses on all parts, I'll also get nice separation in between the different colored regions. So the armor will get a nice separating line of brown where it meets the gold, and so on. The downside is that everything will be stained into the same kind of territory. You know, everything will look a little yellow-brown. But I think it's the easiest way to get this very detailed model looking a little neat. Now, to create a little contrast, once the wash was dry, I heavily diluted a dark muted green. Looks like a sort of modern warfare uniform green. I added this to the most sort of shaded places of the armor, where it would be the darkest if there was an imaginary sky above. This contrasts nicely with the yellowish armor and gives a bit of an added depth. Just a hint, mind you. I like doing this when painting skulls, as it doesn't only add contrast, it sort of gives that slightly moldy vibe that you could expect from a not expertly licked clean skull. And then edge highlights. Oh jolly. Using the original white bone color. This is not my cup of tea, but will it ever be if I don't attempt it now and again? This will be the last step of the whitish armor. The skull elements on the box art are a lot whiter, but I kind of felt like this more relic-style bone works. If we're going with the skull Death Company vibe, then maybe something that looks a little more like old bone is a fun thing. But the gold is very dark now, almost brass or something, and needs to be brought back to gold. But I try to leave the dark tone in all the crevices around the rivets, areas facing down, and only paint on gold, and finally a very, very bright gold, as if I was highlighting a regular base layer with regular paints. So poor Lemartes is doomed to serve as the leader of doomed Marines. The vicious Blood Company kind of redeem themselves by fighting to the death as berserkers, but Lemartes himself is denied this honor. Put into stasis between engagements in the hope of prolonging his intact mentality. So there's no shore leave on Palm and Sandy Beach favored worlds, no umbrella drinks, no hobbies, or a good read by the fusion-powered holographic fireplace. Just battle, stasis, battle, stasis. It says something about Space Marines that, If we just make sure his living life is a constant bloodbath, then I'm sure he'll turn out all right in the end. And this might take some time. Apparently the gene flaw that eventually can bring on the rage in these Marines also prolongs their lifespan, and they can become very old indeed. As far as the bone and gold goes, I think it looks rather nice now. I'm not utterly convinced that it's a good combination, however. So a black and gold scheme would bring out that gold a lot more. It would give a completely different punch to the gold. I'm not sure, however, what else I could have used. A steel would not have achieved the same regal effect. And I've come to the conclusion that this color scheme is just smack bang filled with tricky bits. So, white is tricky, black is tricky, also red is tricky. As in they're all tricky to highlight. Well, for me, at least. I started painting on some red highlights, and it's rather difficult. I opted to do very stark yellowish off-white edge highlights that I could then glaze over with a thin red, just to get some kind of definition happening. I don't really want to go orange, and I don't want to go pink, and so this was the best thing I could think of. And the same with black. I've done a video on black in the past, and I guess, there's roughly 3 types of black. The first 2 are based on sort of similar principles as non-metallic metal, where painting black is based on what type of black material one is painting. If you look at Darth Vader's helmet, for example, it's shiny and has stark, almost white reflections. A black cloth cloak, on the other hand, is pretty much just dull black with hardly any highlights at all. Then there's the Warhammer type black. That's just black with bright edge highlights. I opted for the hypothetical in-between of the first 2, cloth meets Darth Vader, kind of black, by painting up details with a few different shades of grey, again favouring the slightly green-tinted greys to complement the rest of the armour, painting it brighter than what looks right, and in the end darkening it all down with a black wash. This allows me to kind of paint on a little depth and volume, then still sort of keep it, just a much darker version. Again, to try and introduce just a tad of complementary colours as often as I can, I opted for green eyes. It's also the official cool sci-fi super night vision colour. I'll be splashing in this green wherever possible, like on the glow of the insides of the jump pack, something you see on quite a few of the Death Company. Perfect. Not only have they lost their minds in rage, they also fly about. And once assembled, things are looking pretty cool. It's an intimidating fellow. Though I must say, the Warhammer 40K 3rd edition version of Lemartes is truly awesome. It really has style. Well worth checking out. And I told you he was old. Now there's just some details left to paint. These real tricky jewels. Was it not enough with all the gold trimmings? Also a bit of handle on the blood. Croesus. Nothing like a skull chalice with wings to bash your enemy with. Kind of makes me think of Cluedo. Was it Professor Plum with a candlestick in the library who did it, or Lemartes with the skull chalice with wings? Regardless, a purple magenta-ish colour was nice to support that regal vibe happening. Who said death in the 41st millennium could not be glamorous? But the jewels, I fiddled around with them a lot, first trying to paint on some outlines with a white that I then tinted with an orange. I kind of like the orange vibe on the box art, but painters over at Workshop are way ahead in the jewel game. Some very thinned down black to bring things back down again in the middle of the jewel, then back to some orange and very bright yellow reflections. They did not end up winning any prizes, but some of them, from afar, slightly resembled jewels. I'm not sure if the orange was a wise choice, however. It looks too much like the gold and the bone. A more stark red would probably have been better. The orange has a delicate vibe, but I'm maybe not so much into delicate Warhammer. And now Lemartes is done. But he also has this very stylish base. I went about the same technique as on the other black parts, working up a grey texture that in the end were toned down with a black wash. I was relishing the opportunity to paint something without trimmings, without fiddly bits, just being able to swish the brush around at my leisure. I could probably paint bases like this for days. Reveling in the freedom of having no jewels and gold-adorned haunted bits. And Lemartes is done. ready to be put into stasis in the cabinet at Alpha Sphere, where you can check out all my paint jobs from this series, and a lot more of my other dioramas and models too. As models go, I think this fellow looks very cool. It's a little shame that the skull crucible with wings is not held high so that it shows better from the side, but on the other hand, that means it shows better from up top, and this is what is the baseline for these models. To be seen well on a tabletop from above when playing a game. And I like that principle. I think the color swap works. I mean, if one really wants to stick to the strict law side of things, well, you don't have to go this far. But it can be a head start if you want to do something a little different but don't know where to start with that type of creativity. Use the same colors that are on the box, just switch them around a little. And remember, it's your models. You can paint them any way you like. I want to take the opportunity to thank Alpha Sphere for this fun collaboration, also to thank my patrons for their support. I'd be delighted if you check out my Patreon. The support from there is what enables me to make these videos. And please like and subscribe if you like this video. Oh, and check me up on Twitch if you like to see some live stream content from the 52 Miniatures Tower. Thank you for watching. Bye.